Welcome to 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome back. Welcome, Amari.
Thank you. Hello. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Hello.
What's going on?
Hello. I'm
You're
happy.
over there in your own world.
Yeah. That's frequently a thing.
Oh, you
like
just being off.
Charisma
Okay.
world. Yeah.
That's what's up.
It's a very entertaining place.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Cool. I'll take your word for it. That's what's up.
Oh, I was going to offer you a trip.
No.
That's fine. What are we talking about today, Amari?
Actually, okay. Yeah, we're going to stop laughing now. Criminal justice system, prison industrial complex, so on and so forth. Yo, did you know that 25% of all the imprisoned people in the entire world are in the boundaries of the United States?
I did know that.
The United States has about 5% of the world's population, a quarter of the world's prison population. That's wild.
That is insane.
Yeah.
But it's a business that
Exactly.
makes a lot of money. And so I think it was last year, maybe the year before, I met a friend, well, a friend of a friend. Her son is actually at Graterford. And she wanted to do this documentary just about how prison affects families. And because that's often the side of the story that I feel like doesn't often get told, you know, like it's almost like whenever someone ends up in prison, for a lot of people, they kind of dehumanize them, you know, and they become, you know, an inmate or a prisoner or a con or, you know, all these words that have all these negative connotations attached to them. But I don't think we really reflect on how the family and how the communities and like all parties involved are affected by people essentially being put in cages and treated less than human. I mean, like I wouldn't treat my dog the way they treat some of these prisoners.
Exactly.
It's insane.
You know, there's and that, I mean, that plays itself out on multiple levels. Several years ago, I worked with an organization who it was basically a mentoring and tutoring program for what they, you know, referred to as collateral damage of the prison industrial complex, which was the children of incarcerated parents. And you start to see, I mean, because just think about that, right? If you've got a lack of income to the household alone, right? The social stigma of having somebody, even though in our communities we know that the population or the percentage of those who are incarcerated is much higher. We all know somebody or live with somebody or, you know what I'm saying, who has or either at one time was or is currently incarcerated, so it's all over the place. And you talk about it as a business, where we know that the prison industrial complex is the fastest growing industry in the country.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
For treating people like animals, people are making money.
Now, of course, the other side of that is, you know, well, if you can't do the crime, what is it? If you can't do the time, then don't do the crime. Is that what they say? So it's silly, whatever it is, but yeah. So
we all know that everyone in prison also does not necessarily deserve to be there. So we talked a little bit on 28 Days and Beyond about this whole revolution for the opioid epidemic and how now there's all this support and all that. How many people are in prison currently on like a marijuana charge?
Nonviolent drug offenses, the vast majority actually,
right?
Yes.
So those people are not people that I feel like, you know, are violent individuals or that are harming someone by being in society with the rest of us.
Yeah.
It's all about making money off of these bodies. So
today we're joined by Robert Rowe, who's going to help us continue this conversation, because obviously there's so many facets to it.
I'm so passionate about it.
I mean,
angry.
Because it's yes. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond. Welcome back to 28 Days. We're joined now by Robert Rowe.
Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Doing real well.
So you know what we're talking about today. And you have some experience in this area. Tell us a little about your experiences.
So yeah, last summer, while being here, working out for football and things like that, I got the opportunity to intern at George W. Hill Correctional Facility. It's a small prison. Like I think it's actually one of the last private prisons in the whole state of Pennsylvania. Right down in Glen Mills. So I had the opportunity to be like a case manager there. Got the opportunity to like work with inmates one-on-one, kind of see their stories and find out which ways I could kind of help them. While also learning the actual things about the criminal justice system and, you know, what it actually does to these people, like on a personal level. So that was kind of what I did all that summer. And then this last semester, I was fortunate enough to also do work with the Prison Literacy Project at Graterford Prison. So that was kind of just working with the inmates who run their own basically their own education system and getting guys like their GEDs. And actually Villanova has a program in which you can get a Villanova degree at Graterford. So
wow.
yeah, so that's pretty that was something that's pretty big. So this last semester was the first year that they got the newsletter that they've been working on. It's the first issue that they got released in like 5 years because the program shut down for a while. So that's kind of what I've been doing more recently.
So you said that you got an opportunity to talk to some of the people that are there and, talk about their experience and how it's affecting them. What were some of those stories like, hearing them?
I think more so about the specifics of their stories, I think it's just speaking with these people and realizing who the people that we actually have incarcerated in this country. I think there's a big misconception of who we have locked up behind bars.
Sure.
I think you guys were talking about that a little bit, and just like who we think like these animals and these criminals and crazy bad people, and it's just chaos 24/7 behind bars, but it's not. I was, pleasantly surprised when I was, the first couple of years in prison to see that these guys are some of the most intelligent, polite, well-spoken people that I've encountered in my life, and that's kind of not what you expect when you go into a prison. So I think that's what people need to understand. That's something big that people don't really realize. These people are they're super smart. They're in there to get an education. Unfortunately, they probably did make a mistake, which they can't get back, and they actually have to do time for it. But when you realize that the people in there aren't these animalistic, violent people 24/7, you start to realize that maybe the system is a little bit flawed. Maybe there's other ways in which we can correct these people's mistakes and then get them re-entered into society, which is something we don't really do well.
It's crazy to think about as large a role that prison plays in the sort of popular imagination. We see shows about it and movies about it. We really don't know much about these people that you're talking about. Another, that image of the monster is projected onto us. But you're talking about folks who are, you said re-entry is not something that we do too well. What have been the experiences of folks who are coming out of prison and trying to sort of reacclimate to society?
Well, I think for the most part, I think technology and where we're at right now is so far advanced from where these people who've been locked up since, the 1990 or something like that. Like they've been in prison for 30 years, and then you get released from prison. You don't get put into a program on the outside where you can go figure things out. You get released, you're given a bus token, and you're on your way. So things like that in which you don't know how to go apply for a job, and if you do apply for a job, the stigmatism that you have on yourself as a felon or whatever the case may be on your record, you're not likely to get a call back anyway. So it's kind of you're pretty much putting people through this crazy cycle of imprisonment, and then that part is messed up. But I think the even worse part of it is when you release them, you're not giving them any opportunities to really go be successful, which is why I think recidivism is so high, because you're not really giving these people the proper tools to go do what they need to do to re-enter society and be functional people in the society. It's just like you're putting them out there, and what they're going to do, go be homeless or go back to doing the things that they were doing that got them locked up in the first place.
Well, that's the thing. You treat somebody like an animal all this time, and then you expect them to go back out into society and function. It's not really plausible when you think about it. So I think one of the things that I would like us to get into a little bit more, I think, is figuring out some things that can be done to help people re-enter society and to be welcomed and to not be seen only as these people that went to prison. Like, these people had full lives before whatever happened to them happened in order for them to end up where they did. So we're going to get more into that. We're going to take a break here on 28 Days and Beyond, but we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. So before the break, we talked a little bit about re-entering society and some ways that we can make that easier. What do you think some of those ways are?
I think this last semester really taught me a lot about the educational part of it. I think what shifted me, there was a story about a guy that was in Graterford. His mother had sent him a letter, and he was about 15, I think. He was a juvenile lifer, so he was a teenager when he was locked up. And he was functionally illiterate, so he could speak and write, but he couldn't really read past a certain grade level. And he couldn't read the letter that his mother wrote him while he was incarcerated. And by the time he had gained the education to be able to read, his mother had passed away. And he was just talking about it. And he was saying, like,
heartbreaking. The
story, like, by the time I was able to read the letter my mom sent me, she had passed away. And that was more hurtful to me than actually being incarcerated. So that, to me, just talked about the educational part of it and how let's say 75% or whatever the percentage is, I know it's very high,
Yeah.
more than 50, is that people incarcerated are functionally illiterate. They can't read past a certain grade, level. I think that's interesting to me, because if you expect these people that are incarcerated, that they're not serving life, if they're functionally illiterate, how can you expect them to even go out and be successful in society with a job if they could barely read?
Right.
So I think the main part of it is just education, because when you're giving these guys high school diplomas, getting their GEDs, and they're getting even college degrees, these guys are being entered society with a different mindset. Like, I spoke to a guy last semester at Graterford, and he was just saying what education did for him and how it changed his mindset. Whereas if he wasn't reading, if he wasn't changing things, if he wasn't so hostile and didn't know how to really handle situations and remove yourself and then progress, he's like, what do you want me to do? Serve 20 years or whatever the case may be, and then that same person be re-entered into society, or would you want a transformation, which
Growth.
is what education what education can do for these guys. So I think schooling is real big, and I think I kind of got to see that firsthand.
Wow.
But I think we're also dealing with, as you pointed out earlier, there's the business aspect of it. We can't deny. I mean, come on, man. Private prisons where even in some states they have an agreement with the state that if the state doesn't fill a certain amount of beds, then the state will pay for the empty beds, right? Which is to say that you're just locking people up for the sake of meeting a quota. That's crazy.
It's actually really frustrating, and I can even get in firsthand, like just seeing how simple things, as far as like even getting in contact with someone in prison, it's not so much as just a collect call. They have emails, but you have to deposit money, and it's JPay, and it's this one, and the funding, and everything. It's one big business. And I think once you realize that it's not about actually sending someone in there to be rehabilitated and re-entered, it's just about putting a body into there and the private prisons and making their money from it, then that's when you realize what the real problem is. We're not sending guys in there to re-enter society successfully. We're just locking them up, and that's what it is.
Certainly.
Well, we talk about solutions here a lot. I don't even know where to begin with this, because it's been this system for such a long time, and it's like, what do you do? How do you break the cycle?
Yeah. I think, even bigger, the question is, should the focus be on whether we want to put our efforts into getting guys back out, or stopping
people from getting in to begin with?
So that's kind of the bigger question. I think, what are the ways that we can do to get the culture of minorities that are being incarcerated at such a high rate? How can we slow that rate down? Stop getting these guys locked up, so easily.
But here's a question. This is shifting gears to the realm of the utopia, if you will. So we know that sometimes people do things. Right, prisons may or may not have a function. I mean, folks like Angela Davis are calling for prison abolition, to get rid of prisons altogether. But what do you see as some possible alternatives to mass incarceration come on, man, you lock somebody up for 30, 40 years?
And juvenile incarceration, you said, what, juvenile lifer?
So I think they're redoing that now, and they're trying to fix the juvenile lifer situation. But as far as I don't really know. I think prisons as a whole is a terrible idea. When you lock someone up for a 23-hour lockdown, they're completely isolated from society. They're not being educated unless they go out of their way to get it. Like,
it's torture.
It's really nothing that you're doing besides holding them there until they die. I think if there's, like, with the prison I was at in the summer, they're implementing more exercise classes and just all types of wellness programs and things like that guys can do to progress while they're in the system. So whether you're in there for a few months or you're in there for a few years, like, you have to have some type of transformative process, otherwise you're wasting your time. And I feel like as a society, like, we blatantly know that we're wasting our time with the inmates, but like, no one's really doing anything to fix it. And I think that's the most frustrating part about it. Like, I don't really know what the concrete answer will be, but there's definitely something need to be done. And locking someone up for, not, like you said, nonviolent drug offenses, where you see, not at the federal level, but at the state level, these same drugs that people are being locked up for, they're starting to be sold legally in recreational use. It's kind of a slap in the face. And then for someone to say, like, all right, even if it is wrong, we're still not going to release those guys that were locked up for it anyway. Like, they just got to sit, and now it's a new world. It's not a question. Like,
especially
we see that it's flawed.
Third strike for people.
We see it's flawed, but.
Rob, when you figure out the answers, come back and let us know.
Yes, please.
I will. Yeah, sure.
We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. That was, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So
prison is just,
you know, there was something to this conversation that I always think about. The Panthers used to say, crime is a political definition. And we see that with the opioid crisis, right?
do.
So what used to be, you know, it was criminalized. You were on crack, you were a criminal, you had to be thrown away, right?
Yeah.
The political current had changed, whereby now they're saying, oh, no, it's not a crime, it's a public health crisis, right?
Exactly. Even with marijuana, now it's being legalized.
Yo, I mean, people are out there having whole
everywhere.
farms out here, you know
and
what I mean?
making lots of money.
Lots of money, right?
Now, legally.
Exactly. And it's discouraging and it's upsetting because it's not just on the level of prisons. You know, the very popular New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, I mean, she breaks down all the different levels it occurs at. Of course, it starts on the street with policing, right? Laws have to be enforced, and there's a human being who's deciding when they want to enforce the law, right? So as one instance we see this is happening, I'll let it go. And the other, you know what I'm saying? And how that becomes a racialized process.
Well, none of this is surprising to me because, you know, just because this subject bothers me as much as it does, you know, I did a little research on my own and just realizing the history of prisons to begin with in this country and how they were created, you know, after slavery was abolished to lock black people up.
Exactly. Yep.
So the fact that that's happening in waves and in large numbers is not surprising because that's why it was created. That's, you know, when it was created, that's what it was for. But
they're not, I mean, come on. We think about the fact that over, you know, half the population, you're talking about 1 million black people in prison, right? And the entire lives of individuals, families, and communities are being thrown away. So I used to work at Rikers Island, and and I worked with high school age students, because in New York, if you're locked up, you still have to go to high school. And they would tell me the most, I mean, they'd say that a lot of them would just sort of cop pleas because they say, oh, you know, they call it a bullet.
That happens.
You get 1 year. You've already been in here 11 months. That means you go into the court, you plead guilty, you're going home
Even
today.
if you didn't do it.
Even if you didn't do it.
I'm blanking on his name, but the young man, they just did a documentary fairly recently on
Khalif
Netflix.
Browder?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that happens so often, or, you know, someone's parent or family member doesn't have the money,
exactly. So
they sit.
Yep.
And while they're sitting, they're being abused, they're dealing with all these things, and they're thrown into basically this lion's den, and they have to try to cope.
Yeah. Charisma, I wish this was an episode where we could be like, yo, we found the answer. It's clearly not. But hopefully, you know, there are a lot of great folks out there working on this issue, and you know, hopefully something can be done sooner than later, because it literally is impacting all of our lives on a daily basis.
It absolutely is.
But this has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.